Hello, boys and girls. If you are listening to this, you are probably on the Those on Biscuits YouTube channel. This is something a little bit different. If you haven't heard the previous episode, you won't know what this is. Basically, when we recorded this week's show, we went way over time. And part of that was because we opened the show by talking about The Division, and we were talking about The Division quite a while, as you can see by the length of this segment. And we knew we were going to have to cut it down just for bandwidth when it comes to uploading the podcast for the subscription feed, just for the audio. Um, so when we were editing the show, just about the only thing that was like a big consistent chunk that we could just clip through without too much trouble was the Division talk. But we didn't really want to lose it. It was interesting. We wanted to share our views on it, so we thought we would basically take that as a separate chunk, just release it as a completely separate video because later on in the show, we do kind of reference it a little bit. We didn't want it to be completely gone. So you can listen to it here. It's the whole thing. It hasn't really been edited aside from just finding a good start and end point. This went with episode 63. So yeah, hope you enjoy. Let us know what you think. This is John telling you what he thinks about The Division, with me occasionally sharing my insights and queries. Well, that's about it, really. Hope you enjoy it. Bye bye.
But okay. Anyways, on to the Division. All right,
Yeah.
Destiny 2, and okay, there are some similarities, and this is why I was on the fence about it. Because leading up to the release of this game, all of the promotional stuff, all of the E3 demos, and everything like that focused heavily on this idea of like you and your friends joining up, playing, and then like I remember the big gameplay trailer had this group, clearly scripted,
Yeah.
where it was like, oh, we're moving through this police station, and then when they get outside, like, all right, call for evac. And,
Well, it's also fair to say that it is a similar type of game to Destiny, even if it's different.
it's a shooter game that has MMO tropes to it.
Yeah, an MMO
Yeah.
shooter.
But yeah, it shows these guys, they go through this police station, they get out and they call for evac, and they have to wait for X amount of time, and then like another group shows up, and like, oh crap, another group, quick cover. And it was this idea that other groups of players could just kind of wander in onto your game and kind of fuck with you, which was an interesting concept for me. I'm like, oh, that seems actually kind of cool. But I'm like, but I don't have a big friends list on PlayStation by choice. Like I could add every single person that they recommend me to, but I don't.
No, I'm the same. Part of the problem is with me playing online games, I won't play an online game unless there's a good reason to believe I can play it on my own, because I will never coordinate with people enough to actually play
Right.
it. When we played Battlefront together, that was the most I've ever played an online game with someone specific in my life.
So it was. I'm like, oh, okay, well that's cool, but my ability to get these games going is limited. I work a weird schedule. Some of my closer friends, they don't have PlayStation 4s. I mean, you're probably the closest friend I have who has a PS4. So it was this idea that like,
You're so sweet.
But then I watched a video by a game journalist named Patrick Klepek, who I have a lot of respect for, because
He made Ridiculous Fishing. It's a great game.
did he make that game?
I believe Klepek made Ridiculous
I
Fishing.
don't think he makes games. I remember him talking about it. But anyways,
Oh no, yeah, I'm confusing with someone else.
he's a journalist that I really respect. He spent some time with the Giant Bomb crew and did some great stuff there. But he had some of the best articles out when the Gamergate thing happened, and it was good. They were just really great articles that really made me appreciate his writing. So he put out a video about the Vision, focusing solely on is this a good single player game? Which was exactly the kind of questions I was asking. And through his video, it convinced me. I'm like, you know what? No, I can play this game. And you can. You can play that game almost 100% solo if you want. And, oh, no, you could. You can play the game 100% solo if you want. What's great about the game is that what it does is it gives you the option to, when you want to, team up. It gives you a very easy way to do it. And, I mean, there are a lot of things that's really good about the game. The shooting is good. The setting is beautiful. For being a destroyed New York City, it looks beautiful.
From what I've seen, it looks like one of the nicest, probably one of the nicest games this gen.
The the effects, the way they display like the technology and stuff like that, all great. Abilities are fun and easy to use. The matchmaking is probably the best I've seen in a long time. Because, I mean, leading up to this has always been sit in a lobby and wait. Right? Or, try to start a party in general and then try to direct them to doing these missions.
Right, like, you're usually in a lobby for a shooter, but for an MMO, it's a case of walk into someone and then try and either use a chat function or a console command to try and debate whether you join a party, which is kind of a bind sometimes when you consider that often people are only going to want to join parties under certain conditions, you know?
And the funny thing is that WoW uses a system like this too, which is amazing to me why it hasn't been implemented more. Because how it works in the Division and similarly in WoW is you walk up to the beginning of the mission of the area and there's this giant floating fucking text just hovering in the sky going, this is the mission, press triangle to open matchmaking options.
Well, that wasn't in WoW from the beginning.
No, it wasn't in WoW from the beginning. That's something they added later.
If I remember rightly, that was actually one of the more controversial choices because people said that it affected your sense of community because you never had to form a party first and then travel to the destination.
Well, it got rid of the need for guilds.
Yeah.
Which, thank God, guilds are terrible. Guilds...
Well, a guild is alright if you find a good one. And most of them aren't.
I mean, like, clans are kind of dumb too, in my eyes. Like,
oh, I agree. I'm with you 100%.
What? This is a correct tangent. I remember this is something that I need to say about guilds, especially in World of Warcraft. When that game first came out, guilds were serious business, right? They were crazy, and that's when I played WoW. Was vanilla WoW. I had a friend whose dad.
Me too.
I had a friend whose dad got super into World of Warcraft, like insanely into World of Warcraft, and he joined this guild. And no joke, when he joined the guild, they made him go to a specific part of the world. I think it was the undead's main city. Go to this specific room there that had like an empty throne, where the leader of the guild sat, and my friend's dad had to make his character bow. And this wasn't like a role-playing server. Right? They weren't role-playing. This was legitimately him vowing allegiance to a group of people tied together in a virtual world. Yeah. It's like,
Like, I'm not against people who want to get into the role-playing, but if you actually take it that seriously in reality, there's a serious problem there.
Yeah, and there'd be, like, huge disputes, and, like, they had formed a protocol to handle disputes among players that formed like a tribunal. It was insane.
I was once court-martialed in an online Star Wars game. There's a website, you should look it up, it's probably still there, it's called the Emperor's Hammer.
Okay.
And what they do is, it started out for the game TIE Fighter, do you remember that game? It was like a flight sim.
Yeah.
Where you flew a TIE Fighter. You could load custom missions into that game, and it was started off as a thing where people were playing together, and um, you would load in the custom missions, and everybody in the squad would fly them together, then submit your scores,
Right.
right? But they structured it like you were in an actual military organization.
Mm-hmm.
So you were supposed to follow like the command structure and stuff, and I used a piece of software to modify one of my file saves so I had a score beyond the actual possibility. I was court-martialed for cheating.
Fuck off.
I was about 12.
Where you just said, Annika! Annika!
Sanctuary!
I regret nothing! I do it again!
Played the fifth!
I do it again! That's a lead into what the talk coming later. But
Yeah.
You shitbags! But no, so back to the Division, is that it has a really cool matchmaking where you show up to each mission, you can open the matchmaking, you can select what difficulty you want to do the mission on, and then it'll find you a group that's trying to do this mission. And so far, it's been pretty good about prioritizing people who haven't made it very far into the mission. But if you want, like, it will. It's sort of I guess, kind of a gamble, but because they don't tell you the progress that the people are in. But if you join a group, there is a chance that you end up like halfway through the mission, which, whatever, you know, the payoff usually doesn't happen till the end, anyways, story wise. But so that's really great. And like I said, the shooting's fun, and because it has the MMO structure, everything is kind of like stat based, and I mean, it's not dice rolls, but you know, everything's gear based, so your stats change, and they do a very good job making you feel like your stats have actually changed. You know, it's not the case of like, well, I still have the starter pistol, but I can still, you know, one-shot headshots. You know, they don't do that. And that's actually part of the disconnect that you kind of have to give yourself with that game, because you're in a for all intents and purposes a realistic setting, and you're fighting other human beings, and so you kind of have to just accept the fact that because that guy's name is in yellow, he's taking more bullets than the other guy. And they try to like legitimize it by saying like, oh, he's wearing body armor. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to, at some point when you're playing a game, you have to surrender realism to mechanics, right. Otherwise you'd never have a game. But you said that you could play it single player. I'm curious. I mostly play games for story these days. I mean, I like a good gameplay, but I play games for either a decent narrative or an amazing setting, you know, to get lost in. So I guess what I'm curious at is, you can play the game single player, like you said, but as kind of a single player experience, what's the narrative like?
Okay, so the narrative is actually a really interesting thing, because you can tell it's a type of story that they came up with to fit this style of game.
Yeah. Which is the best kind of story.
Right. Because, alright, so the idea behind this game is that someone out there has weaponized the smallpox vaccine, and they coded a bunch of $20 bills. Like, in the opening cinematic, they show them, like, there's just a room full of $20 bills. Like, it's one of those situations like, well, if you have all this money, what the fuck are you doing? You can just be rich, you know? Like, but the person has coded all, and then distributed them on Black Friday.
Right.
And so within a week, like a majority of New York, especially the island of Manhattan, infected, and it's not just a smallpox vaccine. This person has advanced it, I guess, makes it incubate faster, and it's actually contagious while it incubates, which is, and they actually explain that that's the big difference between the real smallpox vaccine and or the not vaccine but virus and this fictional version of it. so this happens, and they kind of run down the timeline in a very like opening to James Bond sort of way, where it's all this very abstract imagery with a voiceover, and but it's like within like weeks, a majority of the population is infected. Supplies have run short. No one can get any supplies into the place because of fear of infection. The stuff that's on the island already is tainted and contaminated. And like within a month, the place has just fallen to hell because there's such a struggle now for resources that like the National Guard can't keep up. The bigger military at large has just kind of given up, and as like a last ditch effort, they activate this thing called the Division. And what they explain the Division as is it's actually really neat. I think it's a cool thing, but it's this idea that in order to have a standing response to cataclysmic events that can't be predicted by like game theory or computer projections sort of thing, they have this thing called Division, where it's a bunch of people who the government deems exemplary for some reason, and you actually find like files on other Division agents with the explanation of why they're selected. It's really like one person, like the dude's a professional poker player, but through observation they're like, oh well, he understands risk, he knows the odds of any situation he walks into, he studies every scenario possible in order to come out with the best outcome, like a poker player. And so he's picked, and so the idea that these people then integrate themselves into normal human life, their brothers, their sons, their co-workers, their friends, their neighbors, but at a moment's notice they can all be activated and they have to respond.
Right, but that's the initial setup. So what I mean is, though,
okay,
when you're actually sort of within the game, what is like the experience of going through the story like, if you know what I mean?
The experience of the game is actually very much what it would probably actually be like. There's a kind of overarching goal, is that you're trying to gather enough information about this virus to kind of try to somehow come up with a vaccine.
Right.
Because one of the first things you do is you rescue a virologist, and you bring her back to your safe area, and she tells you, like, okay, we need this information, we need this information, we need to try to figure it out. I was working on it before everything really went to hell, but then she just got too wrapped up in trying to just save lives rather than do research.
As you do.
So that's kind of the overarching thing. But a majority of the narrative is actually just containing fires, really. Okay, so the other thing about it is that you're not the first wave. You're actually the second wave of Division agents that are supposed to show up. The first one showed up, it all went horribly wrong, they're all missing, they're all dead, or whatever. And you're the second one. And okay, so this is actually a weird thing now that I think about it. Right? So the kind of places off as a cooperative experience, an MMO experience. But one of the very first story beats that you have is that you show up at Brooklyn, you do some training missions, and then you and this woman are supposed to go over to Manhattan to join with the rest of the agents who have showed up to be the second wave.
Right.
And so the helicopter's coming in. They're like, okay, well, all the other agents are already on the helicopter. Let's go. We gotta move. The helicopter blows up. So they make this real push about, you're it. You're the only one who made it. but then I can team up with other agents whenever I want. It's a story misstep, but
It's video game
but
logic. You've got to play
it's
along
the
with it
idea
sometimes.
of like that's why they're sending you specifically to all these different places is because you're the only one who can actually handle the situation. But there's other
Well, it's a little bit like in Elder Scrolls Online. It has the same sort of Elder Scrolls plot where you are the chosen one
right.
who gets out of the initial plot at the same time, and you are picked to reunite these disparate elements. And yet,
There's like 100 of you running around.
about 30 of you escape from the tutorial area at the same time.
Yeah,
As
it's you know. Same thing with Destiny. They like, oh, you know, your ghost finally found you. Well, it's the same ghost. Everyone has the same ghost. We all watch the same opening cutscene. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that's a video.
The
game
only game,
logic.
the only one I haven't seen that does that is actually DC Universe Online. You played that,
Yeah,
right?
no, yeah, they.
Where the setup with that isn't that you're the chosen one, but Brainiac releases all these things all over the world that give all these individual superpowers. So the storyline in DCU Online is basically almost everybody on Earth has superpowers now.
But like they establish a person who's supposed to be kind of like the mastermind behind it, this guy named Amherst. But right off the bat, it's not a case of we're going after Amherst. It's, hey, go to his apartment building and find the shit that he might have left behind. They don't care. They don't care about finding him. All they care about is getting the information they need to try to come up. It's everything is crisis prevention and crisis handling.
That sounds interesting.
And it's I really like it for that sense. Like you got the theme of it all, that it's you're not really there to beat the bad guy and win the day. You're there just to try to fucking like save as many people as you can. And so most of your missions revolve around like finding hostages or gathering supplies, fixing infrastructure, I mean, that's what they say that the whole point of the Division is to reestablish society if it falls.
So actually, what you're dealing with, I suppose, and I think it sounds like an interesting way of dealing with the narrative, is rather than following through a story, what you're actually trying to do is handle an ongoing situation.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
It sounds interesting.
That's exactly.
It sounds like a much better way of handling an MMO plot.
Which is why I don't necessarily agree with some of the criticisms I've seen about, you're like, oh, Ubisoft again coming up with a terrible story. No, this game isn't a story game. It's you know, from the onset they tell you like your job, like I said, is to reestablish a society after it falls. That's the fucking tagline. Like, when society falls, we rise. Right? So it's not about you going through this, strict, succinct plot line. It's whatever story there is uncovered in the path of just trying to rebuild a fallen society that happened fast. You know, it was like a blink of the eye. This shit fell apart. So it's not like you're dealing with ruins. You're dealing with people who are. I mean, that's what your enemies are, even in that game. You're not dealing with a terrorist organization. You're not dealing with an invading army. Your enemies in that game are people who are responding to this cataclysm in horrific ways. Like, people who, see the fall of civilized, the civilized world as an opportunity, to kind of do what they want. And in the wake of the outbreak and everything that went wrong, what you get is cases of like street gangs who, before, kind of acted with some sort of restraint because there was a police force. Something. Yeah. Well, the police force is gone, so they can act without impunity now. And so they're just having open warfare on the streets, and so you have to combat with that. You got this group called the Cleaners, who are people who, in all reality, they're people who kind of have a good intention in their mind of, well, we're not infected, but we can stop the infection here, and their solution is they'll burn everything. So you got these guys rolling around with flamethrowers and Molotov
sense.
cocktails, and
it's probably the ones doing the right thing.
essentially, yeah, but they go very far, as in, like, they'll just find groups of people who they suspect might be infected because they weren't wearing a mask or some shit like that, and just incinerate them alive.
Hey, if it works.
God, there's a lot of things you can. Okay, so those are all things that are really good about the game. I do want to bring up some issues, and most of my issues don't actually come down to gameplay. Like I said, the gameplay is all in all fun, and that's why I don't even criticize like the lack of variety in mission type, because it's a shooter, and regardless of whatever weird objectives they have you do, as long as the shooting is good, the game's fine, right? Because in this day and age, a difference in objective means I push square here instead of over there. You know, that's how games work these days. But there's a lot of weird things, like, tonally about the game. So the other thing that that's part of this world is this organization called the JTF, the Joint Task Force. And kind of like the Division, they sprung up in the wake of the Cataclysm. And what it is just, it's National Guards people who were kind of left behind when everyone else bailed, police officers, normal citizens who kind of grouped together and formed some semblance of a law enforcement agency. So most of your missions and stuff are tied with them, right? You're better than them, and they make it very clear that your character is better trained, more capable, and your focus is to be like the precision strike, while they're kind of out there just trying to maintain some sense of normality. So a lot of the game comes down to you go into these safe houses, you meet up with the JTF officer who's there, and then he gives you all these side missions to go on to, and then through doing those side missions, it eventually opens up to the story missions, which are more difficult or harder, and they reveal more about the game. But every one of these JTF characters I've met so far are these weird caricatures. No joke. I had to do a series of missions with this one JTF officer who was like a new age guru, and literally, like, at one point, like, you have to go fix an antenna, and when he tells you to go do it, he's like, a strong wave of negativity has manifested itself on the physical plane in the form of a broken antenna. You have to channel yourself, and to accomplish this, you'll have to intercede on the physical realm. What? It's just like, and then like there's one guy who is kind of a 2-bit actor, and he tells you like, oh, hey, remember me? I'm the guy who was on that show. And so every time he gives you a mission, he's like, yeah, that was actually like it's like an episode on season 2. So if you need any assistance, just give me a call. I can tell you how that show went. And it's these weird, goofy things like that. But then I walk out on the street and there's like literally like people dead being gnawed on by dogs and shit. It's
like tonal mismatch
right.
there.
And like and they don't like shy away from how horrific some of this would actually be. Because at the end of every story mission, you'll uncover. So far, the way they've done is that when you finish a mission, it'll be like, hey, by the way, we uncovered this bit of surveillance footage. Why don't you take a look? And like one of them was like the dash cam of a police car, and it shows it like weaving down the streets, and things are already going bad, and they're like yeah, Officer 252 said, he needs some backup here, but I don't see him. And all of a sudden, his dead body just falls on the hood of the car. And then all these looters show up with guns. And you just see the bullet holes riddling through the windscreen. And there's tons of like screaming and yelling, and there's bits of surveillance footage like showing like some of the first wave agents being swarmed by rioters and looters, and watching them just being brutally beaten down with baseball bats and chains and shit like that. And it's like you see this shit, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, and then I got Mr. New Age nutbag over here telling me to go fix a fucking antenna, and it's shit like that. And so there's a weird disconnect there, and then they do an admirable job explaining this, but you can tell that this was something that one of the developers had in mind, and he wasn't going to let this idea go. Right? One of the collectibles in that game, because there are, it's an MMO, and a Ubisoft game. So there's tons of collectibles.
Ubisoft love their collectibles.
So there's collectibles, and most of them are like phone recordings, which are actually really interesting. The phone recordings are really interesting in this game because it's just normal people. Like,
I like any collectible audio logs. I don't know why. It's just a thing that appeals to me.
The best ones ever were BioShock. Those had the best audio logs.
They were pretty great. I always used to like Dooms though, where they were like, I'm just recording this message on my pad for Steve in accounting. I'm leaving the powerful shotgun in the green cabinet at the end of the floor, and I'm putting the code in as 973. How are the wife and kids?
Right. Like, these ones are pretty good. Like, one of the ones I thought they was really kind of cool and really describes the tone that they were going for with these audio logs are you find this one, and it's like, hey mom, it's Sarah, look, things are getting pretty bad here. I've tried to get off the island a few times, but they've locked down the bridges. The boats aren't going anymore. They said there might be like a transport tomorrow I'm going to check out, but I don't have any really faith in that. So I just kind of wanted to call you and tell you something. Mom, I'm gay. Rebecca, my roommate, she's not my roommate. She's my girlfriend. I hope you understand, and I really want... It's shit like that, right? It's all these logs that you find are like people sending these last messages to like loved ones, or just random conversations that they're having like right before bad shit happens.
I really hope though they're just in that voice. Mom, I'm gay. I miss you, sweetie. just you.
Right, yeah, just me saying it.
Every single one. My roommate Rebecca is not my roommate.
Well, honestly, it does sound a little bit like that, because not as stilted as me, because I'm just trying to recall this from memory. but they do record them in a sense of like, this person hasn't really thought through what they're trying to say. They just know that they want.
But I want them to just all be you.
Maybe.
I want you to be every member of the city of New York in the Division 2.
The Jonathan's Return. But yeah, and this is such a kind of clever thing too. Every phone conversation that you find is never just that. It's always part of a series. And they list the series, like if you go into like the menu that lists all the collectibles, they tell you like a daughter's call to her mother. And it'll show you that you've unlocked one of two. So apparently somewhere in the city, there's another phone recording of the mother's response.
I disown you.
Yeah. No, that could actually happen. I've come across shit like that where it's like a husband or like ex-husband calling his ex-wife like hey, things are going terrible. I'm sorry the way things ended. I know I made mistakes. Please forgive me. And you find her response like, fuck you, I hope you die. And so they do like an amazing job like fleshing out what this world is, even though it's essentially like barren, you know? It feels alive in a weird way.
Well, this wasn't an MMO, but it was an open world game. One of the things that the last two Arkham games got really, really wrong is they had a barren world, but without a decent explanation.
Right. Oh, wasn't one of them just there was a snowstorm?
Yeah, in Arkham Origins, it's snowing, and they tell everybody not to go outside. So every single person you encounter in the streets is a goon.
Right.
And that's because the mechanics are the same as Arkham City, where the city was a prison. And then in, I think, Arkham Knight, they've evacuated the city. That one works a little bit better, but...
A little bit.
But there's still a weird thing, because the city's, like, huge, and all the lights are on.
Well, that's kind of a weird thing about this, too, is that because of when the attack happened at Black Friday, when by the time everything goes to hell and you show up, like, everything goes to hell between a span of Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and, like, the day before Christmas Eve. That's how quick that this shit apparently goes to hell in this game. Because when you're walking around New York, there's nothing but Christmas lights on everywhere. And they give a sense that people are just kind of utilizing the Christmas lights as emergency lighting. And,
it works.
And they actually kind of go into, like, you'll notice if you do a mission where it's like, oh, hey, you gotta reroute the power and get this section up and running, that section will actually be lit up. It reflects the things that you do. Which is neat.
Definitely.
Um,
And I like games where the environment changes in reflection to your progress. I think it's kind of important.
So, I guess the other big thing to talk about that game is, I don't know what I was going to say is, we got sidetracked on this. But one of the collectibles is called Echoes. And it's this really weird thing to have. It's really neat to see. But the weird, like, just bone-thin explanation for it is just dumb. Did you ever see that movie, Deja Vu?
No.
Oh, okay.
But if you ask me that twice, it'll be a really funny joke.
Hey, did you ever see that movie, Deja Vu? You're right, that was funny. Yeah, you're right, that was funny. There's this weird explanation. Deja Vu is essentially that the U.S. government has developed a time machine of sorts, but you can only observe the past. And so they bring in this like brilliant investigator to look at scenes from the past to put together this terror plot.
That sounds interesting.
It's not a great movie, but it's interesting. But the way they explain to him, because they don't want to tell him that they invented time travel, they explain to him is that it's breakthrough in surveillance technology where they're able to collect all this cloud data from cell phones and phone receivers and DVDs or DVD players and shit like that are supposed to recreate this picture perfect image of the past.
Right.
And that's how they explain it to him. But the reality is just they invented time travel. They do the same thing in this game where you come across these things called echoes and your little robot AI buddy things all like, echo available. And all of a sudden you'll see all these lines and shit showing on the screen. And it's all like, collecting cloud data, collecting surveillance thing, collecting known audio from the area. And once it collected all of it, it casts this holographic image of the scene that happened where you were standing around you. And you can go around to all the holograms and it'll like blink and it'll bring up this person's name, like, oh, James Jones,
James Jones.
shit like that, you know. It's,
you had time to think of a name, and the one you came up with was James Jones.
Fine, Jimmy Jones.
Steve, not a real name.
Like, occupation, school teacher, known location, unknown, sort of thing.
Known location.
Yeah, no,
unknown.
It'll say shit let's say like last known location, unknown. Or no, okay, I'm sorry. It says last known status. That's what it says. It says unknown.
Last known status, unstatus.
But you can walk around this hologram and then you'll hear like the conversations that are happening or that were happening at the time. It's a goofy thing, and it's clear that it was just one guy's like, we need to put this in a game. Let's put it in the Division. Alright, whatever.
Well, that's in Arkham, the Arkham games as well.
Oh, is it?
There are these, there are these, crime scene investigation things that are like little puzzles where you find pieces of evidence, and every time you find another piece of evidence, Batman uses his detective mode to create a forensic reconstruction of the events.
Yeah, but their explanation is like, oh, this happens because Batman.
Well, yeah. Well, Arkham... I remember when the Arkham games came out, they were like, for once, we're going to help Batman feel like he's the true detective. We're going to add the detective side, because you never see that in games. Actually, it makes Batman look like the worst detective in the world, because he doesn't have to figure anything out. He's just got a computer that tells him everything.
Right? Like, I can do that. In fact, I am doing this. I'm doing this right now. But I mean, but
there's one
the nice thing
bit.
about it is that
There's
those echoes... There's no... I say nice thing, there are probably people out there who think that this is terrible. But there's really no major gameplay element to them. It's just another bit that sort of fleshes out the... Yeah. So, and I prefer that than me having to try to sift through this shit and try to...
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm all for anything. Like the hololog, the audio logs are just something that fleshes things out, but I really like them. But before we move away from Detective Vision, I have to tell you this about Arkham Knight, because I've forgotten about this, and this bit, I generally made my disappointment with Arkham Knight known, but there's a moment in Arkham Knight where you have to solve a crime by watching a man being repeatedly thrown down the stairs. There's this old man, I forget the exact nature of the puzzle, but like he's a millionaire and he made a deal with the wrong people, and now you need to find out what he knew. So you find this control panel where you can view the CCTV of when the people he was working with turned on him and they pushed him down these stairs, and he just rolls down these stairs. He rolls down this long flight of stairs that pass like 3 cameras.
Of course.
And to track him down, what you're supposed to do is watch the cameras and rewind and fast forward until you find the point where his hand touched things.
Oh, and then...
Because you're trying to get 3 handprints to reconstruct a handprint, a full print. So to get it, you have to flip between these 3 cameras, repeatedly watching him hilariously fall down the stairs.
The best thing too is when you speed it up, all you can hear is...
It's great. It's a weird sequence because you're like, I'm just watching this man fall over again and again.
So I guess that's what I have to say about the Division. I have done the Dark Zone stuff, which is their more traditional MMO area in the game. They have a section in the game just quarantined off that to serve this. I
love how you're like, I suppose that's kind of all I have to say on the matter. Like, you didn't just spend an hour telling me.
But I didn't want to go that much into Dark Zone. It's the PvP area. It has its own like weird thing that you can talk about for now.
No, by all means, tell me for 2.5 hours.
But no,
I don't mind. I am only kidding, but it's quite funny.
So no, I would say if anyone who's listening to this is kind of on the fence about Division, pick it up. It's an absolutely fine single player experience, and there's enough content that you're gonna get a lot of time on the game, which is important,
I am gonna play it at some point. Probably not
Right.
soon, because I've got a lot on my plate. But I everything I've seen has actually looked more appealing, and like I don't like Tom Clancy games, so early on I wasn't interested.
This one doesn't feel like
it looks quite different.
Game.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they've all been quite different, haven't they? I mean, Rainbow Six Vegas isn't anything like Hawks.
But they all
Hawks?
had the kind of like super serious fetishizing of the military feel to them.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, have you ever read a Tom Clancy book?
Right. I mean, that's his style. Fair enough. This one feels. Honestly, I feel like they could have gotten away with not calling it a Tom Clancy game, because I've played Ghost Recon 1, 2, and Future Warrior, which was terrible. I've played Hawks. I've played the Rainbow Six games, and it's always this. All right, team. We're gonna move in. We're gonna eliminate the target. Danger close. Shit like that.
Hawks actually is hilarious for that, because all the briefings and the stuff are really intimate and like, yeah, and then it's like, now zoom the camera out a mile. You're in a plane.
This game feels way different. So like, even with the main storylines, because you get your main story missions from 3 different people, so far, but they have a habit of like cutting in on each other's transmissions to you. Like someone would be like, all right, you gotta go to this dude's apartment, get the information you can find out. Like, hey, I don't mean to cut in, but there's people in there. You gotta fucking save them, man. Hey, we have bigger things at hand. We have to figure out. There's people dying in there, and like everything you get in the game is just people are like, shit's gone wrong. Fucking do something. And like nothing feels like competent military organization. It's all like, oh shit. Like, which is nice.
Yeah.